Great. Well, now is actually an excellent time to talk about housing at the federal level, because we're currently monitoring the T-HUD appropriations bill, which is moving through committee, which funds a lot of the HUD-based programs that exist out there. And Senator Klobuchar has offered her support and urged the chairs of the committee to make sure that the home program, community development block grants, the National Housing Trust Fund are all sort of protected on their funding levels under this appropriations bill. I know in addition to that, last year we were able to keep consistent funding levels for a lot of the affordable housing programs that exist out there. Some of them I already mentioned before, the home program, Section 8, Section 4 housing, community development block grants, and we were able to raise funding levels for certain programs such as LIHTC, the low income housing tax credit, and in addition to that, the home program as well. Also, Senator Klobuchar, she's been a consistent supporter of USDA rural development and rural housing programs as well. A lot of these programs out there support things such as rental assistance, home loans, senior housing, home rehabilitation programs as well. So that's sort of in a nutshell on what currently the senator is working on in terms of affordable housing. I know, talking to folks across many communities right now, that affordability, accessibility, availability are all issues in addition to that, other more specific housing needs such as workforce housing, senior housing, etc. So on that note, I think we can open it up to some conversation about some of the topics that Kurt had discussed as well. So for the county and municipal leadership and folks in the room here, tell us a little bit about sort of the current challenges and that you're facing, in addition to that, the projects that you're working on, and some of the successes that you've had. Ryan, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I guess one of the projects we've been working on, hopefully with the city of Wadena, is getting funding for Highway 10, Highway 10 coming through the city of Wadena. It was a state-initiated project, and a lot of the costs get, the locals have a burden, a share to participate with that project. There was state bonding dollars that were successfully received for it, but one of the pushes the county board and the city here is the four-laning of Highway 10. I'm sure as you came into town, this is the only section of Highway 10 that is now reduced to a two-lane corridor. Given all the different commercial traffic, especially with 71 being the intersection here in town, we've been loudly saying we believe from a safety aspect, from a commercial freight movement aspect, of the full lane of that particular complete Highway 10. With the FAST Act and some of the things they're pushing at the federal level, sometimes they put more restrictions on those dollars to make it, if you have a project proposal, sometimes you have so many restrictions, you don't get to propose your project. So that, from my perspective, let's say FAST Act gets approved, is it gonna be open enough or non-restrictive enough that either MnDOT or the county, or some sort of partnership, are we gonna be able to apply for those funds to propose that type of project? So, Jeanette, if you want to add in on that. Or?
In addition to that, when the Highway 10 project, we're going to believe it all, it's coming when it gets here, we have infrastructure in the ground now. We're going to be required to move it. That'll be at our cost. That is a huge cost for a city to bear. So as Ryan spoke of, there was some funding this last go around that the city received, and county lobbied on our behalf. But we're hoping to also receive some funding to go along with that, so that we can move our infrastructure as MnDOT requires, but not where we have to pay for it all.
Yeah. What we've been kind of hearing is some of the things from other counties is that there's the big ask we've heard is less restrictions on some of the funding requirements, as well as there's been the ask for the kind of a recalculation of those, like who applies for those grants, etc. Is that something that you're also seeing as well, as far as you being competitive for the grants?
Ryan has more experience than I do.
Anytime you have a funding opportunity, it seems you have 2-3 times more proposed projects than the eligible funding amount.
Okay.
When you're talking lessening those restrictions, sometimes you have to have a specific agency be a project sponsor,
Okay.
which sometimes can be restrictive that way. Or, I guess diverting a little bit off Highway 10, let's talk about, the bridge funding component of it. Sometimes for the bridge, we have to have a certain sufficiency rating before it's eligible, or it has to be on a certain type of roadway classification. So you might have a project as a local county engineer, this is a high priority bridge to get replaced on the system. Well, it's not on a major collector roadway, so it's ineligible to get the funding that's available. So from that perspective, it's great that we get these dollars, but if it's so competitive that we're applying against, let's say, St. Cloud or even Brainerd, and you have traffic volumes as a major scoring criteria, we will never succeed on getting all the points on that particular criteria. Even though everybody passes through here or uses it. So I guess there's always that, how do you fairly score different funding applications when you have a smaller county or municipalities that we have here against the Brainerd or Stearns County or even Sherburne County, or, so that'd be my key point, if we could at least loosen it up enough that we have a fair chance at any available funding.
Okay. And since we're kind of on the subject, this is actually one of our partners who's joining us for the entirety of the tour, Serge from MnDOT. Do you want to introduce yourself and kind of talk about what's happening here? And
Ryan, what's your last name?
Audit.
How you spell it?
ODDEN.
And you're the county engineer?
Correct.
Alright. And Jeanette?
City Administrator, City of Wadena.
So I work with MnDOT in Government Affairs Office out of the central office. We do the administrative side, the operations, the operations folks for D4, right?
We're D3.
D3, so you work with Steve Avas as planner, and for you, Andy, Rommel, Kurt, this project, this is the urban mill and overlay, right? On 10th that you're talking about? In town?
In town right now, they're doing a reconstruction project. They're in the first phase of that.
Is that the one I came in as sorry, were you talking about a different project?
That was the first project I was talking
Okay.
about. Our, I guess, local concern would be, right now, we have 6 miles that is Highway 10 is 2-laned.
Yeah.
This reconstruction project they're doing is within the city limits of Wadena. We can roughly say the middle 2 miles. They're gonna build it wide enough for 4-lane, but since the 2 ends are 2-lane, they're only gonna stripe it as 2 lanes. So it's still, when it's all done, gonna be 6 miles of Highway 10 being a 2-lane road.
Yeah.
Now, they said they didn't have the money for reconstruction of the rural portions of Highway 10. So they did do a mill and overlay on the, by the time we're done, all 6 miles will have.
Are you fine with the mill and overlay rather than
the
full
pavement
reconstruction?
The pavement structure, the pavement needed it.
Yeah.
Just the age of the pavement and the conditions and the potholes, it needed that, some sort of pavement rehab. That is the Band-Aid they're putting on until.
Can you tell these guys why we make these decisions to do a mill and overlay versus reconstruction?
Well, reconstruction is when you're, moving dirt. You're moving a lot of dirt, so you're doing all the drainage structures, you're building the roadway, and then gravel, and then you get the asphalt pavement or concrete pavement, whatever a designer values out. For MnDOT, they do a lot of metrics on how many times are we spending our crews, you know, crack filling potholes, all those things that a highway department or MnDOT does to keep that roadway safe for people driving, or, you know, we don't want a motorcycle hit a pothole and go off into the ditch. So you get to a certain point in the life that you have to do something with that top surface of the pavement. So, from a long-term maintenance solution, they did the correct fix at the time, is to fix that top part of the pavement. From the local side, what we've been seeing is, just from a safety aspect, from a freight movement aspect, the 4-laning of Highway 10, given the traffic volumes, and I know of different accidents that have occurred, because people aren't expecting to have to stop to take, somebody's taking a left-hand turn on Highway 10. You go all throughout the whole state, people get into road days, meaning they kind of expect what's happening on this type of roadway. We had maybe the commissioners or Sheldon, when did we have that multi-car accident on the 2-lane section? Was that last fall?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, we've had several.
Yeah.
There was the one not
But
too, couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that was, last fall.
So, you know, if we have that safety aspect, if somebody's on one of my local county roads, they're expecting people to be slowing down, taking a left-hand turn, you gotta wait behind them, there isn't bypass lanes in most places. So here we are on Highway 10, you've probably been traveling 2 hours, 3 hours from any direction. You're not expecting people will be stopping in the middle of the road to wait to take a left-hand turn. And then also you get these traffic volumes, there isn't, people aren't judging the gap distance, right? People are still going it's 65 miles an hour, but people are really going probably 72 or better. So we get accidents or close calls because of people misjudging the gap distance, because they're seeing a 2-lane roadway and you expect to kind of make your driving decisions based on that aspect of it. So I guess from our point search, MnDOT needs to be prioritizing 4-laning of this
turn
road.
lanes, like adding turn lanes.
Well, I'm saying all four
Yeah,
lanes.
I know about the gap, that's,
So,
that's unfortunate, yeah.
so when, you know.
We don't have money to address it, that's the.
Well, we're competing in this district against I-94 down here,
That's a tough competition.
So that's part of our aspect here. We're competing against I-94, St. Cloud, projects in Brainerd, 371 project or 210. So if we can get funding from like a federal source, if MnDOT can pull in or help prioritize some grant dollars towards something,
Do you know if it's a high-risk rural road, is it classified?
I don't know.
Not its classification, but is it categorized that way?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
I'm gonna think, Ryan, the other problem we see with Highway 10 is it falls in 2 MnDOT districts. Which
Right.
really makes it difficult.
And so when competing for those kinds of fundings, I want to point out that our office, the senator, she does write letters of support for any grants that you might be qualifying for. That's something we found that not everybody is aware of, and she can contact specific heads of agencies to bring attention to those things. And so if there is something like that, always reach out to our office for those kinds, because that's one way that we can be assisting to make sure that your project is getting the fair chance and the fair look that it deserves by highlighting that with some of the administrative heads. We might come back to transportation, but I want to also just kind of make sure that we have a chance to discuss other issues as well. For the broadband piece of things, I guess how is that happening? How is that going here in Wadena?
Go ahead, Sheldon.
Well, West Central Telephone has acquired some grants to extend it around the west and south side of Wadena, but we still have a lot of areas that either have no service or very poor service.
I live in the Key West district, 1 mile too far to the north and 2 miles too far to the east. And they told me it would be a very long, long time before they would ever come here.
Okay.
And I'm not in West Center's area. And my children went to town to do their homework because they could not get anything in their house.
Where do you live again?
I live north of Staples.
North of Staples.
I cannot get a hot spot that'll work in my house because I'm too far from a cell tower. We have a dish on the roof for internet, and you couldn't stream a thing in my house if you tried. So, I mean, I worked for the Census Bureau prior to this job, and there are many parts of this county that I cannot pick up my signal from the Census Bureau's computer to do my job, because there's not broadband or even cell service for me to get the information I needed for that job. So there's a vast amount of this county that is not serviced with broadband.
Anybody happen to know like the percentage is or anything like that? Sometimes we do. We can look it up later too.
I think two of our co-ops, Consolidated Telephone and West Central, have taken the leadership in the area. I think to their credit. But they serve either predominantly our smaller communities or rural communities. Staples and probably Vernville, Wadena are caught in split between Charter, CenturyLink, and
Harvey.
and which other one?
Harvey.
And there's not really the base for them to make major investments, so some type of support is needed. I also serve as chair of the Lakewood Health System Board, and if we're gonna ever get into telemedicine and get into those homes, we're gonna need much higher capacity and speed in order for it to work. So I know in the Staples area, we've been working a long time trying to get broadband grants to enhance our coverage.
You mentioned speed. Is there, for what people are experiencing, is there, we know there's a difference between the unmet, which it sounds like is for your situation, versus the underserved. Are people like having issues getting the appropriate amount of like the speed data that they need in their homes, or is it just if they either they have it or they don't have it?
I think fiber optic to the home is pretty within the West Central, Sabika, Monaga, parts of Ferndale is quite good.
Okay.
But some of these other areas are less than that. So
I can, if it's helpful, I can tell you that 91% of the county has access to good speeds of 100 down and 20 megs up, and then 93% have access to 25.3. So it seems like people, for the most part, people who have service have good service,
Okay.
but you've got about that, almost 10% that have. That means that 10%, as you said, have nothing. Very, very limited. They don't even have that access to 25.3.
Dead zone, literally.
As it's been said, West Central and CTC have been great
Yep.
partners. Fiber to the home in most cases, but you've got those pockets where there are the incumbent providers that West Central and CTC haven't been able to get to, or aren't able to get to, and in town, in the city of Wadena, or in the city of Staples, it's different providers. So yeah, the co-ops have been wonderful in this part of the state, getting high-speed internet to the home, broadband, fiber to the home. So it's just trying to expand their access.
Well, part of that was the franchise agreements that had to be in place, but now that law has changed, so that opens it up so that they can actually come in without franchise agreements. That actually goes away on September 26th.
Is that a state or a federal?
State.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have some flexibility at the city level soon.
Soon, yes, and I still need to work with our city attorney on how that's gonna look, but yes, that law does change September 26th.
Do you want to kind of transition to discussing housing for a little bit then?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Tammy, thank you again for joining us today. Yeah, so if you could tell me a little bit more about the current housing climate and the current housing market right now in terms of affordability, accessibility, that type of thing.
We have a lot of people in the county that need housing. We don't have a lot of housing in the area. Affordable housing definitely is low as well. We have waiting lists for the Section 8 program in the county, and that usually averages to be about a year long, just because we don't have funding to be able to help that many, but also we just have a lack of housing in the area to be able to have them move into the area. I'm filling in for my boss, and she sent me a few questions for you guys too. So she had read an article about Senator Klobuchar wanting to ban discriminating people for their income, for people income based on their income. So she doesn't exactly know what that means. Like, how would you ban people from having income based housing?
Yeah, I think what made I'll take a look at that article as well.
Okay.
But essentially, I think what she means by that is ensuring that that we're trying to create more availability surrounding income or affordable housing for people of lower incomes and things like that. So kind of creating that availability through programs such as LIHTC and things like that. Home program that provide sort of these ways for developers to create more affordable housing units, I believe. So,
Okay.
But we can definitely connect offline about that. I can kind of
Okay. Yeah.
clarify some things surrounding that.
Sounds good.
So like in terms of
Yeah.
the applicants for your Section 8 program, how many applicants do you have, and what's like your availability? I know you mentioned that the waiting list is about a year or so.
So the average applicants so we have a list that's a preference that live or work in Wadena County, and then we have part of our listing is for anybody outside of the county. The entire list is usually over 100 people. Within the county, I would say is probably 70 of them. I would say probably 60 to 70% of them are Wadena County people.
Okay.
That are waiting. So, and when people's names come to the top, we issue them a voucher, and a lot of people can't find a place, or it's not doable for what the Section 8 program requires. It's not a decent housing for them to be in. So.
And is like workforce housing, senior housing, are these also issues? These are stuff we ran into in the previous meetings from yesterday. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And are there any sort of efforts surrounding that are being done at the local level right now, or?
I am not sure, I guess, on that part. Maria would know more about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you know.
We are working on it, so go ahead.
The city of Wadena is working on a couple of different housing projects to promote additional new housing. We are working with the Housing Authority and the school district to try to construct new homes for the students to gain knowledge on those types of construction trade jobs, and then the home gets moved on to a lot in Wadena by the Housing Authority and completed and put up for sale as an affordable home. We're also working with a development agency that is looking to buy some tax forfeited lots in Wadena, and so the city council is working with them to make those lots affordable and again build affordable housing for first-time home buyers. The other thing that is happening, we've been working with a private developer who is building twin homes and multi-unit apartments for primarily for senior housing. And they just completed a 42-unit project in Southwest Wadena that's focused primarily on senior housing.
Mm-hmm. And that first project you mentioned, kind of utilizing that as sort of like a workforce development way to capture
exactly.
people trained in with the trades.
Trying to get more students engaged in the trades and interested in that because again, there is a huge gap in workforce for the trades.
Mm-hmm.
Does M-State have a construction program here?
They did, but they don't anymore. They have, I believe they have a construction electrician and a HVAC program. But, and I'm not sure if they have a plumbing program anymore. or not.
I think that's.
Maybe that's all together.
It's all together, because I know there are a couple guys graduated.
So, but they did have a construction trades program that involved carpentry and all aspects, but that dropped off.
I was just curious if they were, well, if they're not doing it anymore, but if they had built homes that would go back into the low-income housing market, but just the high schools are kind of doing that project.
High school is doing that project right now, Andrew.
And for some of the current projects that you mentioned that are being worked on, do any of them utilize any of like the federal programs, like, you know, the home program or LIHTC or anything, or community development block grants, or?
As far as I know, they don't, but that is definitely something that we need to look into with the school and the housing authority.
And if I can pipe in, snuck in the corner here. The city of Sabika just got notified this week that they received $111,000 through the Rural Housing Preservation Grant to the USDA. So that will provide 11 grants to low-income homeowners to fix up the exterior of their homes.
Is that a pretty consistent problem out in this region? We ran into that a lot in our conversations yesterday, with home rehab being a big thing, so.
Yes, and that's another thing that the city of Wadena is in the process of applying for a community block grant for small cities development. Small cities development grant for housing improvement, to improve our current housing stock and commercial property.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Oh, I'm Katie Hepner. I'm the director of the Economic Alliance. We're a nonprofit that does economic development for Wadena County.
Thank you. And those are some of the program that Kate mentioned as well is a good one as well. Some of those USDA rural development, rural housing programs that they have as well, I know offer, you know, certain assistance with, you know, housing rehab, rental assistance, home loans, things like that, so.
I'm Mike Willey. I'm with Human Services here in Wadena County, and I also serve on our Region 5 Adult Mental Health Initiative, and I'm also on the Family Homelessness Prevention and Planning Board with Mahabiatwa. So I've got a few different links to kind of housing here. I'll just echo the sentiment that I think the biggest issue for Wadena County is affordable housing locally. We've been working through our AMHI to develop affordable housing and housing with supports, and we got funding for a project called White Oak Estates over in the Baxter area, and so we're really excited about that and the opportunities that provides for people in our region, but Baxter can be a long ways away.
Oh yeah. And
people who identify Wadena as their community of choice, and people who want to stay here, that's a struggle with that, and so you know, that's a really exciting project. It offers 20 units that have support for individuals with mental illness, and then another 20 units of low income. So there's a lot of supports that exist there, but it is a stretch. And then to talk about income-based housing in my work with Mahabiatwa there, you know, one of the things that I hear them talk about is there are times when they even have funding to be able to support people, but the lack of actual affordable housing is a significant enough barrier that they can't always utilize the funding. And it's not always the case. Many months they are out of funding. But you know, I think the affordable housing piece is certainly a struggle here in Wadena. So I appreciate the efforts that you talked about in supporting developers to develop affordable housing.
Definitely. And just kind of wanted to circle back to that workforce aspect of it for the economic development and housing folks in the room. How far are folks driving in terms of, you know, getting to their jobs out here in the Wadena area?
Well, we just did a study with the University of Minnesota, and roughly 100 businesses were surveyed in it, and it showed the average commute time is like 30 minutes or less, the majority of employees. So, I mean, compared to other rural areas, significantly less.
And Commissioner, I know you brought up a great point earlier about the telehealth aspect of broadband. Is that affecting sort of the senior care and senior housing that's existing out there? Because with the lack of options for seniors to have if they can't stay in their homes, with telehealth, is that forcing them out and creating another sort of senior care housing issue? Or
Well, I'll just talk about an apartment that was just built in Staples in Wadena County. That apartment is a twin of one that was built in Stearns County last year. The taxes on the Stearns County one is about $30,000 a year less than the one built in Wadena County. Really wish the press wouldn't be here right now.
It's okay, just say off the record.
They never listen to me anyway. They've heard this before. Wadena County, if you were in a $150,000 house, is the second highest taxed county in the state. And that would be proportionate right down to the $50,000 house. And yet we are in the bottom 3 or 4 per capita family income at the same time. The two collide. We don't have enough affordable housing for the low income or even the moderately low. And we don't have the infrastructure to support large industry that creates the jobs. So we don't have the benefit of huge humongous lakes in Wadena County. We have some marginally good land, and then we just have a lot of not so good land. So it's a dilemma, and it's Commissioner Kangas and I serve on as the budget committee, and it's a collision course trying to meet the mandates, the wants, let alone the needs, and come in with a respectable budget that tries to lower the taxes. So anyway, I guess you guys can write most of that if you
When you talk about the infrastructure, kind of supporting the region on that, is there things like public waterworks and stuff that has been in this region? Is there anything other projects other than just roads that we should be aware of?
We're taking care of it in Ferndale right now. We had an issue probably a year and a half ago when our wells went down. But rural development stepped in. We've been fine with grants and stuff. We moved up the list right away because it was an emergency. We'll have new water probably by the end of the year, hopefully, and then a new water tower by next summer. So
Outstanding. Okay.
So it's been a big. I mean, we've had no problems since everything was.
George, Wadena has gone through some work in that area too.
We've been, it's kind of, Wadena's broken into 4 sections, and we've been, I'm not sure when they started them, but we've done the northeast and the northwest. And then the biggest project we just finished about a year and a half ago was the southeast project, and that was around 13 million. But the quadrant we have left is the largest in the city, the southwest. It would probably be the infrastructure, and that would be comparable to doing the other 3 quadrants. And some of that infrastructure is aging to the point where we are seeing issues with, old clay lines caving in and stuff. And so we know we're gonna have to do it, but we just don't know where the funding is gonna come from through.
And we were notified of a MnDOT project in 2025, so that we have utilities there that we need to take care of. So in addition, we're concerned about our southwest quadrant. Now a new project has come on, and we actually are working on another new project that is gonna require infrastructure funding as well. So that's where we have really good infrastructure here, we really do. And it's wonderful, but as we're growing and things are aging, we need to take care of it. And right now we're kind of in a quandary where we have a lot of projects at the exact same time, which is taxing us financially.
Okay.
Brian brought up, you know, some of the grant funding dollars, the competitive grant funding, not just for highway infrastructure, but for utility infrastructure, sewer and water, and stormwater management. And I don't know if some of those grant programs can be structured similar to what Minnesota DEED does with their BDPI program. A percentage of the fund dollars in that program are designated only for rural Minnesota. So, and I believe it's 60% of the funds that are allocated to the BDPI program, for an example, are designated only for rural Minnesota. And I know, you know, in that program, for example, Brainerd or St. Cloud is considered rural, but maybe there's a way that some of these other grant programs for infrastructure, for roads and bridges, like Ryan was talking about, could be designated to lower income counties, or I'd really like it if the senator could look at ways of fairly distributing those grant dollars to the people in the counties and the areas that really need it, and just don't have the population to make that happen.
I mean, an example of that was the corridors of commerce, when we're looking for the Highway 10 money. And that part 50-50 is supposed to be 50% metro, 50% rural, and it never got farther north than Elk River.
Yeah, Elk River was considered in the rural category.
It was a real slot.
So I know economic and workforce development has been a topic that's been brought up before. I actually focus on workforce issues out of the senator's office. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the situation surrounding that and some of the you know, public-private partnerships or what's being done on the ground to, you know, sort of, you know, try to solve this skills gap.
Okay. Well, I think there are a number of things, and I also serve on the advisory board for the M-State College here in town, and these are things that we discuss when we talk about programming. What are the needs? And so I do get a lot of feedback from our industry in the area, retailers, industry, all commercial segments, of the need for various trades, whether it's welding, whether it's a contractor, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. And so we're seeing even the high school, again, through their construction program, working with students to promote the trades, and that's a good thing, that helps, but I believe that we need to have more support for our technical schools, our trade schools, to be able to fund projects and programs that support the trades, whether it's a carpenter or automobile mechanic. Those trades are necessary. There's a shortage in every single one of those categories, and it's just very hard to attract workers into those because there's a lack in programming funding for training, and there's also a lack in the workforce. Part of that comes from childcare issues. And that's a huge project in itself. I know Katie will want to speak to childcare. She's just waiting to jump right out here in the middle. But that is another big part of it. Is the childcare is keeping people out of the workforce. They can't find childcare.
Not to mention how expensive it probably is when they are able to find it. It's not accessible, yeah.
To piggyback on that, we have a business in town, a bakery that has been trying to reopen. They bought the old bakery, they renovated it, And, you can order rolls from them, and they'll bake you up some rolls, but they can't get the doors open to serve the public on a daily basis because they cannot find anyone to work.
And to add on to what Dean was saying about the vocational education, I graduated from college in the heyday of vocational education. Every 2 or 3 communities had their vocational center where high school kids could go and they could be trained to do those hands-on skills. That was funded by the Carl Perkins Act. And that federal money dried up after about 10 years, and our rural districts were expected to fund those programs. Our rural districts can't afford to do that. And so then all of those vocational centers in rural Minnesota ended up closing. I know they still have some in the metro. And the CEO class that I am facilitating has classes throughout the United States. It was actually started in Illinois. And there are about 40 of those programs throughout the country now. But Illinois, Indiana, those states still have those vocational centers that were started 50 years ago. We got the mindset in our culture, I would say 10, 15 years ago, that every kid needed a 4-year degree to be successful. And so parents and school administrators and teachers have encouraged all the kids to go to that 4-year school. Today, I will pay my plumber more than I pay my doctor if my toilet doesn't work. Because, I'm healthy, so I'm okay without having a doctor that day, but I need my toilet to work. So we have not put value on those hands-on occupations like we need to. And that has led to the shortage of people with skills, people that are in the trades that can be that plumber, electrician, and those types of work. And those are the people that we need to stay in our rural communities. And part of the basis for this CEO class, we are completely funded by business investors because they see it as economic development. If I can show my students 50 different businesses in this area, and now they know that they can get a good job at Holland Molds or 3M, and stay in rural Minnesota and have a good job that has better benefits than I had as an educator with a master's degree.
Yeah, I know Senator Klobuchar, with her role in the Commerce Committee, she's been very much in support of CTE programs, 2-year community technical colleges. I know she's consistently pushed for and supported more funding for the Carl Perkins program, which I know you brought up is very essential to local workforce programs around here. She's been supporting and leading legislation on apprenticeships, making them more accessible and funding them so staying local players can get into that and utilize them. So that was my next question. I was going to follow up. Is local industry in the region, are they utilizing some of these apprenticeship like the apprenticeship models, or?
Yes, in fact, Homecrest Outdoor Living manufacture patio furniture and they distribute it worldwide, actually. They recently I worked with them on a grant for training dollars for welding, for some welding training, and that was through the college. So there are programs that are available, and they are being used. We just need to continue to support these programs and build on them to make these opportunities available to be able to get people trained and into the workforce.
And I know you already have the trades pathway program as well. You mentioned through the high school, which I know is very good to help develop that industry as well. I do want to talk about childcare though, because I know you wanted to talk about it earlier, Katie. So yeah.
Well, one of the things I'll just point out, I'm not sure if you know the latest numbers, but Wadena County is short 406 child care spots.
Oh wow.
That's how many children today that with 2 parents, or if they only have 1 parent in the workforce, who aren't being served. Have you worked with First Children's Finance? If you've heard of them before, they're a nonprofit. They work throughout the Midwest on child care. And they have something called the Rural Child Care Innovation Program. And Wadena County was just chosen to be a part of that. They only choose like 5 communities a year. So we're excited to really dive deep into that issue because it's affecting our businesses. It's affecting even our students at the 2-year colleges.
So do you have numbers on how many people it's forcing, like how many, I guess, adult age people it's forcing out of the workforce then, or?
We don't have numbers on that yet. Once we go through this program, we'll have a lot more data to be able to share on it. Right now, we only know the scary 406.
Oh, yeah.
And that was enough to like jump
Oh,
us into
absolutely,
action,
yeah.
you know?
But we know that it's also extra hard for those who work, other than normal kind of shifts, like at the hospital or some of the manufacturing, that if you're trying to find childcare at 7, 8, 10 at night or 3 in the morning, it's really hard. And, you know, it's a consideration, so I'm excited also with Katie to see the numbers as we go through this process. But, we have some challenges.
I mean, that's a really good point you brought up with the healthcare industry too, because a lot of these, you know, nurses, you know, nursing assistants, things like that, they need it, you know, to work those hours essentially, you know. I know one thing that we're doing at the federal level regarding childcare, Senator Murray from Washington, she had released a bill to sort of cap it. It's like income-based capping of, you know, childcare affordability. So that's something I know that she's been leading on, and Senator Klobuchar has her own bill as well called the Childcare Workforce and Facilities Act. Representative Peterson's leading it from the House. What it does is essentially creates federal block grant streams of funding to state and local areas, so then they can utilize that money to support you know, people that want to enter into the childcare workforce industry or childcare industry as well. You know, through supporting them and through education and you know, loan forgiveness, other things like that to help, you know, give them the tools to make, you know, the industry a more attractive, you know, workplace. And the facility side of it is, you know, through that block grant funding, it would help create more, you know, childcare facilities to help build and rebuild, renovate them as they come.
So we're coming up close to the kind of our window here. Is there anything else that somebody's been burning to talk about that we haven't covered?
I have one statement.
Yes.
We've been talking a lot about great programs and ideas and things to help us, and we need that here in Wadena County. But another thing you know, the whole other thing that's a troublesome thing is the taxes. Some of us are feeling, you know, plenty of taxes. So, you know, we kind of want everything, lower taxes and more programs, so. Yeah, but I think we do need to, you know, mention these issues.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any other subjects that we haven't or didn't discuss enough?
I just want to circle back to where we started with the Highway 10 corridor and really emphasize that I know that the city and county really want to partner to push this project forward, so it will be a true 4-lane, and we want to make this happen, you know, while we're still all here. And so anything the senator can do to assist, that would be wonderful. And it is a lot of money, and we recognize that, but it is a need for us out here.
What would it cost? What's your estimate?
Wasn't it?
Around 60 million. It's $3 to $4 million per mile to convert. But the safety issue of the Highway 10 rebuild is so critical to our community, and we don't feel that the powers to be are understanding the importance of the safety that we have.
And how much money does the county have to do it?
Zero. It's zero.
And the city will have to spend money to move our infrastructure for it, so, yeah.
For perspective, how long has the community been working on this Highway 10? It's
40
been,
years.
yeah, I was gonna say decades.
No, since 1904, Dwayne Pullman showed me a file in his office that was, relating to the Highway 10 4-lane construction in Wadena in 1949.
Is there a big project going on now on Highway 10 downtown?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the 2-year project.
But it's only
It's a big project.
blocks.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
So there is a project
so
going on
within the city.
downtown. It's just not this
reconstruction.
gap.
Yep, and then and I don't know if you were here when we were originally talking about it, when it's finished, it's still gonna be a 2-lane road.
Yeah.
It's gonna be striped as a 2-lane and everything through town, because that's what's feeding into.
And when was Wadena, this section, kind of the outlier as the only stretch of 2-lane road? When did Highway 10 everywhere else get?
1976.
So it's been
1976,
43 years.
The rest of the 4-lane was completed. Vernon Tawberry did.
Not in Staples.
No, that was in,
Staples
on
was 2-lane.
District 3 or 4, the DL district.
Staples,
Was
Staples run,
1976.
yeah,
Staples
Staples
was
run
in
through was about 10 years ago.
no, was it?
Yeah, around 10
in the
years.
80s.
Okay, yeah.
But so they've been the outlier 10 to 12 years.
It's been kind of piecemeal over the course of these decades, but now
Before
it's
it
down
was
to one community,
Mm-hmm.
the only one left.
It's time.
Just go to Wikipedia and type in Highway 10. And it'll say a major 4-lane highway that feeds except for so many miles.
Ryan, you know about this EIS that was done a few years ago?
Yes.
That's significant, that's a thing that you'll have to address to get that plan to be competitive, okay? I think you know that, right? But, yeah.
With that,
That's an environmental impact statement that was done a few years ago.
I will say that the Staples one happened because of federal intervention and help. Representative Oberstar, on the Transportation Committee, got the money for, here's the overpass and the rebuild of a north-south corridor. State of Minnesota, do your east-west, and that was a
Tiger grant.
Yeah.
And some earmarked dollars, which we're not allowed to do anymore.
No.
And you're talking about the bridge over the railroad tracks, where it's a little bit different here in the community, but that was in 2012 when they completed that, because I remember the ribbon cutting for that.
You're right.
What year
So
it was.
I said it was about 10 years. So.
Yeah, the delegation, Congressman Peterson, Senator Klobuchar, they all worked on that for the Tiger grant for sure.
Yeah. So, some people call that pork barreling, I suppose, but,
And 371 got money in the corridors of commerce.
I will say I knew that.
And that was,
with that piece, I'm gonna say some of us are gonna be around a little bit longer after this, but I know other people that do have follow-up meetings, et cetera. So we do wanna conclude there, but if you wanna come grab us and continue this discussion, change information for future conversations. I just wanna say thank you all for making the time this morning. It's been a pleasure. We're bringing a lot of this back to us. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.